Can you hear me?
I can, Tara. Am I picking
I
up now?
yes.
Oh, excellent. Finally.
It's nice to finally be able to actually hear you while we're doing this.
Yeah, yeah.
I wanted to ask you to introduce yourself so that any of our listeners can know more about you before we tell them the hazards of being a microbrewery in this current climate.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my name is Philippe Cornet. I am President, CEO, and sole employee of Quality and Compliance Solutions, LLC. It's a consulting firm that helps small to mid-sized businesses get their paperwork together and meet the expectations of the regulators and their certifying bodies.
Do you want to share any of your contact information with everybody so they can know where to
Oh,
reach you?
you can find me at LinkedIn. It's my first and last name, Philippe Cornet. You can also contact me on my company's website, which is the letter Q, the word and, cs.com. That's for Quality and Compliance Solutions.
What made you want to address microbreweries specifically?
Well, microbreweries and I have a special history. It was actually my first job in the food and beverage industry. So it was at a microbrewery, a little place called Diamond Bear in Little Rock, Arkansas. And yeah, it's always had a special place in my heart. It's also the reason I got interested in food science. Not coincidentally, was the craft beer movement was at its height at the time when I was just starting to enter college. And I got bitten by the fermentation bug there and started to homebrew and brew competitively. I got my beer judge certification. I think that was back in 2008. I was still fairly active in the community at that time. So yeah, microbreweries have really been an integral part of my career. And more recently, I've assisted one much larger brewery set up a satellite operation. Yeah, it just continues to be part of my wheelhouse. Craft beer is the only segment of the market that's really experiencing growth right now. I think that's an important point about all this is the craft beer market is the future of sales. These micro and nano breweries, they're the ones who set the trends. And if you look at the industry analysis, it's craft beer and imports that are leading the growth. It's not big beer. It's not domestic lager that's doing it. It's craft beer. Domestic lager sales have been declining pretty regularly since 2016. It's important to note that the shift in consumer preferences has been pretty hard and towards the side of craft beer. In my state, brewing is huge business. Oregon is home to 281 breweries, and those 281 breweries are operated by 228 companies. And these companies are mostly small enterprises, and they generate a lot of economic activity directly and indirectly. In 2017 in my state, it accounted for $4.49 billion. So it's a pretty big blow when draft sales all of a sudden dry up. That's a lot of Oregonians that are going to be impacted. I think it's about 31,000 or so. I know that you have a wider audience than just Oregon. California has a huge beer scene. I can think of 4 or 5 fantastic California breweries off the top of my head. And California we have what, 8 million people here. You guys have 20 some million. So if all things were equal, you'd have that many more times revenue coming in through the beer industry.
We do have a pretty big microbrewery scene locally in Central California too. Some of the microbreweries I'll be bringing up as we talk about the different points. According to the Brewers Association statistics from 2018, California was number 1 in the U.S. with over 900 craft breweries, and then the economic impact of its industry was generating $7.345 billion in 2018. So yeah, we're pretty big.
The craft beer scene is a draw for tourists. I was as surprised as anyone when people started coming to Portland in droves. Our craft beer scene up here brings a lot of people from out of town. We have Oregon Brewers Festival up here every year, and it's a huge draw. It's the largest independent micro and craft brewery festival in the United States. In California, one of the biggest breweries I think of is Sierra Nevada down there in Chico. And I know that when I'm in the Chico area, I become a beer tourist when I'm not working. Sierra Nevada is one of those I'm going to check out. But along the way, me and other beer tourists are likely to discover other little places like Feather River or Secret Trail. These kinds of smaller producers are, where you go after you've visited the big guys. And you can try some different, more obscure styles that get a little more cutting edge and get even a little closer to the people in the community, because it's not the Sierra Nevada tap room where the locals are going to go drink. It's going to be these little places, these artisan producers. This is where you're going to find some real treasures. Preserving the scene is a big deal for tourism and keeping tourism going in your area.
What are some ways you are seeing microbreweries adapting to packaging and distribution with the issues where people can't come in to drink and eat and participate?
Well, as you know, the current challenge is getting beer into the hands of your walk-in patrons. And most of the microbreweries, the folks under 1,000 barrels, rely heavily on either draft sales to other restaurants or to walk-in traffic to their own facilities, their tap rooms, their restaurants, etc. Number one, it's really to refocus the business to off-premises sales. I mean, that's going to be forced by our governors and public health officials.
I know locally we have Tioga Sequoia Brewing, and they have a good amount of cans available that you can order through their website. And then they're also doing phone in and mobile order pickup at their location where they can bring it to you curbside.
That's great. That's exactly what you see over here with the folks who are succeeding. They're really getting it right out of the gate. And number two, where allowed by law, set up e-commerce for the brewery.
So you're suggesting more direct to consumer through different mobile options too?
Yeah, if a brewery doesn't already have online ordering set up, they should definitely look at getting that. Even if you don't have the fancy website, you can do something as simple as a Square website or even QuickBooks. You can set up a basic online store if you don't have some of the web development resources that these other folks have done. And yeah, that can really give you a much needed boost to meeting your customers. Three, make regular posts on social media about products and new packaging formats. A lot of breweries here are going to be going to big efforts to adapt to this environment. It allows a great opportunity to bring the public into that process, to show them what's going on. If you have a micro bottler showing up for the first time, make a post about it. Show the new cans that you're going to do. This kind of thing, it helps build buzz around the products in the brewery, and it shows that you're still out there and active, that you have something to offer the community. Fourth, locate and secure contract mobile packaging services if it's available. Otherwise, you'll have to contract with a bottler or acquire your own to cover the off-premise sales. One of the biggest challenges has always been trying to keep that product fresh on the way home from their visit. And the solution for, 2 or 3 decades has been the growler. And more recently, we've seen the introduction of large format cans at some breweries, the so-called crowler, the 32-ounce double seam can. That's a really phenomenal packaging option for a lot of folks. Dixie Manufacturing makes that. It's great. It has a small floor print, and the cost of cans is significantly less than that of glass, and it keeps the beer fresh longer. One of the ways breweries are addressing their current challenge is adapting to a more transportation-friendly packaging format. The crowler is an example of an innovation in that area. There's some other products out there on the market that are pretty darn good. I have a great little product. It's called a drink tank, and it's a insulated thermos that actually you can put some head pressure on, so it will hold pressure in the refrigerator and keep it fresher longer. And you don't have some of the downsides of oxidation and loss of carbonation that you see in the crowler or the growler, because once it's open, it starts to age and spoil immediately. How a lot of the folks are addressing this challenge is meeting it with more transportation friendly packaging formats like the double seam can or bottles. There are some options in the Portland market, for example. There's a couple companies that are mobile bottlers and mobile canners. And for a fee, you can have these guys wheel their truck onto your property and reformat your kegs into cans and bottles. And that's given a lot of breweries a lot more flexibility.
I know locally we have Mercenary canning solutions for mobile canning as options. And then in Oregon, you have Tin Man mobile canning too.
Yep. And there's also a company called Green Bottling. Yeah, Tin Man is based out of Clackamas. They'll come to your place and reformat for you.
It's especially important for microbreweries that may not have the overhead to be able to can it themselves or pay to have a bottling facility.
Yeah, the cost of ownership on that equipment is relatively high, and it also takes up a lot of floor space. And one of the challenges really is real estate. Microbreweries thrive on traffic, and high traffic areas have premium real estate. So these micro canners and micro mobile bottlers really fill that niche well, because you don't have to have your floor space taken up with bulky equipment when you have patrons in there. Those who got on board early on and already have that capacity are doing great. Locally, we have two great examples of that, and that would be Hopworks Urban Brewery and Old Town Brewing Company. Those guys were ready to go with the cans way before this outbreak happened. And so it was only a matter of modifying their ordering and distribution system. They've done really a phenomenal job of getting their websites up and making it real user friendly. And then this is more for Oregon. Our state insists that you only utilize approved carriers by the Oregon Liquor Control Commission. Currently in the Portland area, there are about 29 smaller carriers who can do this work, and big guys too, like FedEx, but those guys don't make a whole lot of sense for sending a few growlers across town or a few crowlers and a six-pack across town. The OLCC does have resources posted on their website that breweries can use to locate these approved carriers. They call them for-hire carriers. These are individuals and companies that have gone through the process of filing the paperwork and getting approved and keeping appropriate records of their transactions.
I know some of the demand is going to be lower because there's going to be less foot traffic. What would you suggest for suspending production and purchasing, and how will that affect the supply chain?
Most of the beer sold in the U.S. is packaged. That represents 80% of the entire market. And the domestic market is really dominated by InBev. They have a 40% market share. Molson Coors is around 5%. Boston Beer is around 1%. There's really at the top there for most of the volume. Those are committed sales. So the malt and the maltsters and the hop companies that supply them, they're going to be doing good no matter what, because they already have the infrastructure and distribution to retail channels in place. So they're going to be doing good. It's really the little guys that I talked about before that are going to be struggling to find markets for their specialty products. So varietal hops and pellets and whole form, I really expect to see this crop year, bigger fraction of that diverted into extract type products and not available for use as whole or pellets. So we're looking at a short-term reduction in supply on those kinds of things. Craft beer takes up quite a bit of the specialty products from these guys, and I expect to see the ones who serve the craft beer industry primarily struggle the most. We had Omega Yeast recently suspend their operations. They just couldn't operate. There weren't the orders there. And yeast really is one of these organisms that needs to be regularly refreshed to be healthy. You got about 2 weeks of life on an auger slant. You'll see similar things to that in the keg, in the unitank. 2 weeks is really all you got for viability. So you have to constantly be turning it over to keep it fresh and healthy. There's some ways brewers can keep their own yeast supply up by doing small pilot batches and maybe dedicating a keg or two feeding their starter cultures if they do feel themselves pinched by the supply of yeast. The chemical suppliers and the beverage gas people, they can expect to see big declines in orders. Well, this pandemic plays out, but they're already fairly consolidated, so they should be able to weather it.
You said Oregon Liquor Control Commission has responded. How would you suggest state liquor control boards respond in order to help out?
OLCC has responded to the COVID problem by making the hours of operation ban wider. Previously, you couldn't purchase beer or wine after 4 o'clock, I think it was. You'd have to order before 4 p.m. and they've extended out that time. They've also extended out the radius that a facility can operate. Before, you had to be physically present inside the licensed facility to make your purchase and take receipt of the product. They loosened up the regs and made it so you could be within 100 feet, which allows for social distancing. Those were pretty good moves. The liquor control agencies can help micro and nano breweries by encouraging folks who have capacity to either become carriers or warehouses for the microbreweries and tap rooms that don't have a lot of real estate. Cans and bottles, they take up a lot more space than kegs in terms of just warehouse volume. It's much more efficient to put it in a keg than it is a bunch of bottles. And allowing other businesses to come in to fill that space, it's only going to help out the industry. So one thing that these boards can do is they can put all the applications online and make them prominent, especially for the warehouse and carrier type things. I think the liquor control commissions and similar could up their game a little bit by reducing some of the burden on becoming a distributor and a third-party carrier of the beverages, at least for the time being. Currently in Oregon, if you want to deliver beer to someone, you have to be a beer distributor. So you have to go through the entire application process. And that can take quite a bit of time to get approval. And I would like to see a shall issue permit system go into place where folks could take orders from consumers, consolidate them, and then do the gathering and distribution from various affiliated microbreweries. You see some applications out there and services such as Drizzly. We don't have that in Oregon because of our current regulatory framework, but it could be amended with the stroke of a pen. They can also make approval instant, but keep it easily revocable. That goes back to about having a shall issue permit system. So you put a little bit of trust out there and you give people the tools to put this thing together and you just check up on them when it's needed. Another thing the liquor boards can do is publish a searchable directory of approved carriers and warehouses. Currently, OLCC has a list of approved carriers up. That's helpful. Having a list of warehouses up as well would also be helpful. And putting in some kind of sort and filter feature would be extraordinarily helpful. There's some room for growth there. Another thing these agencies can do is waive the bond requirements for warehouses, at least temporarily. And last, getting the liquor control agencies to come in and modify their rules. It would be looking at their requirements on the application. Some states, and Oregon prior to the pandemic, required business plan be submitted along with the applications. This plan was supposed to address how they would handle checking IDs on delivery to the customer or maintaining the security of the warehouse, etc. Where they have these requirements, they could really help people enter this space by putting a sample available to the public and making it so they could adapt the sample plan at the point of application so there's not a delay. or a rejection for failure to submit a plan. These are some common sense things that could really help. Additionally, relaxing enforcement of label requirements, particularly for the small brewers who don't have a regular draft line. So they're not in supermarkets, they're going directly to customers. These guys are going to be scrambling to get their perishables into a container, and they might be loading it directly into Brights and using a Sharpie to write on the can, and might not have all the required statements. So putting a temporary stay on the requirements that they have, statements on the container like caution contains alcohol, or alcohol is known to cause birth defects, or any of these other types of statements that the state and federal government require. Having a little bit of relaxed enforcement on that would help out quite a bit.
You would suggest that they handle it in a similar way that FDA handles food facility registrations?
Yeah, and in a similar way that California handles it too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So FDA handles food registrations by a simple matter of just logging on and entering your facility information. And after you've done that, you're approved. And it's just up to the FDA after that point to come in and check up on you to make sure everything's correct. That's the beauty of a shall issue permit system. It's putting trust in the business, and you're just following up on a complaint basis or regular surveillance basis. And for small orders and consumer direct shipping, it just makes a lot of sense to open the field up to folks who might have a refrigerated truck around. I know there's a number of produce distributors out there that are struggling to get their volumes moving again, but they do have this refrigerated capacity. And if you move to a permitting system that was a little more generous, you could solve a lot of the distribution issues.
Thank you for taking your time to talk with me today. Is there anything else you'd like to add or let people know?
Number one, support your local craft brewery. Patronize those establishments who've figured it out, definitely. Volunteer. You can also lobby your liquor control board to get more common sense measures put in. Make it easier for the folks who have on-premises license to get off-premises licenses. These kinds of measures can really help out and save the industry as a whole. Probably the last thing consumers can do. If you have money that you can invest, now would probably be a good time to look into buying some shares, bonds in your favorite brewery. Their struggles with liquidity might prompt them to sell portions of their company off or sell debt. And this could be a good entry point for someone who has a little extra cash to enter the craft beer market and support their local brewery.
They all sound like well thought out options to help out local breweries and keep everybody afloat during this hard time.
I think it's important to remind your listeners of the ways they can help out. Not everybody's a craft beer fan, but I know personally, if this pandemic blows over and now I don't have my favorite little pub to go to, something's going to be missing there. It's very much a part of the community, these little places. And I think it's important to try to preserve those.
Definitely. I'd be very sad if all the microbreweries locally had any issues because they are a mainstay.
Those who do have online ordering, please use it. Those who don't, give me a call. I could help you set something up. I have a personal friend who opened a brewery about 4 years ago, and he's just still figuring it out here too. So my heart goes out to them. I wish them all the best. I thank you for this opportunity to talk to your audience, and thank you personally. This has been a great experience. This is my first time on a podcast. Yeah, you're in 3 types of media. That's incredible.
Thank you for taking time with me today, and hope you can hang out with your kids now that we're done talking.
Yeah, I will join the parade.
Go back to your lecture on multiplication with your kids.
I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot.
Yep.
All right. Thank you very much, Tara.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.